Okay, hello everybody. So nice to see you all since last Thursday. And does anybody have anything you'd like to share? Any news, any exciting items, or anything going on? Nothing. All right. So you may be aware of or not, but in the schedule there is no session next week, the 20th, because I had a prior commitment. So we'll meet again in 2 weeks. So I had already sent you emailed you a copy of the handouts, but I also posted it in the chat if you need a copy now. Uh, so we'll continue with our discussion, and I will go ahead and share my screen. And by the way, if you have if I can't see you when I'm sure there is a way around it, but I can't see you when I'm sharing full screen. So if you like to say something or put something in the chat that needs my attention, just um, unmute yourself and speak. That's okay. All right, so we continue. We're on session 3. Then again, we continue with characterizing variation, and in this session today, we'll share some cases and discuss them. And at the end, I will have some time set aside if you have any data sets and any projects that you like to share, and if you have any data sets for practice. I also send a couple of references. One is Myth about Shewhart control charts. That's by Don Wheeler. And then there is a paper I wrote a long time ago, Control Charts Theory and Methods. It's just an instructional paper, and you might find it helpful. So the framework for our discussion is to understand variation. As Deming says, life is variation. And life is variation, and variation there always be. And the bolded portion is what is the variation is trying to tell us about the process and about the people that work in it. So that's what we're doing. What is it that variation is trying? And of course, we're moving towards the idea of Shewhart control charts characterizes that for us. And then a quote by Lloyd Nelson, the central problem of management in all its aspects, including planning, procurement, manufacturing, research, sales, personnel, accounting, and I included medicine. And law is to understand better the meaning of variation and to extract information contained in variation. That's by Lloyd Nelson. I just wanted to show you who Lloyd Nelson is. I know a lot of people don't quite know that and attribute this quotation to Dr. Deming. That's actually Lloyd Nelson's. Lloyd Nelson is referenced 14 times in the Out of the Crisis. Is one of Dr. Deming's favorite people. Notably, on page 20, Dr. Deming lists a list of questions or pronouncements by Lloyd Nelson. And in that, the line, the most important figures needed for management of any organization are unknown and unknowable. That's actually Lloyd Nelson, and Dr. Deming always attributed that to him. And then in the section about the funnel experiment, Dr. Deming says, I'm indebted to my friend, Dr. Lloyd Nelson, for this experiment. So the funnel experiment was introduced to Dr. Deming by Lloyd Nelson. And another person that is of Dr. Deming's people he references is Churchill Eisenhart. If you look at this video, it's a roundtable discussion organized by the American Statistical Association with Dr. Deming, and there are four people around the table, and two of them, one is Lloyd Nelson and Churchill Eisenhart. You find it very interesting to really watch.
Faisal, sorry to interrupt there. I did have a look and it said that that video on YouTube is not available anymore.
Okay, that's where I found it. I'll double check that.
Thank you.
Okay. Did it give you an error or just this was specific about this video?
It just said that video not available, I believe. I checked it on, was it? I checked it soon after you sent
Okay. I generally, when I post things like that, I'll make sure I click on it and it opens it. But I'll after today, I'll check it this afternoon. I'll send you an update. Those of you in instrumentation and laboratory work or in general in understanding variation might be interested in a classic book known as the Precision Measurement and Calibration. That was a National Bureau of Standards publication. It's a little dated, but it's classic in that field. In there, Churchill Eisenhardt has a couple of articles, and one of them is called The Realistic Evaluation of Precision and Accuracy of Instrument Calibration System. So when we come back in a couple of weeks, we'll discuss precision and accuracy, and we tap into Eisenhardt's article, and also a chapter in 1939 book by Shewhart. A chapter is on precision and accuracy. So that will be some of the references we'll talk about. Now, to recap a few things we've talked about so far, Shewhart's rule for presenting data. I know that some of these things we talk about, data collection and analysis, it seems to be some recent suggestions and ideas, but it goes back all the way to 1939, what Shewhart suggested. He suggested some rules with detailed discussion, and he offered rule 1: the original data should be presented in a way that will preserve the evidence in the original data for all the predictions assumed to be useful. And he goes on and elaborates. That's in the 1939 book, A Statistical Method from the Viewpoint of Quality. Four important characters. He suggests that 4 important characteristics of the data is numbers representing the numerical values of measure, text describing the condition under which each measurement was made, including a description of portions of operation of the measurement. Doesn't that sound like operational definitions without him naming that? Of course, he was familiar with that. It's with the work of Bridgman. Human element or observer, and then order in which, this is very important, order in which the numbers were taken. So some of those things in recent times by different writers have been updated and been used, and I put that in a slide as rules for presenting data, and that data presentation should preserve the evidence in data for all predictions, and we've talked about predictions, and time order. The order by which you collect the data is the most important characteristics of the data. And then you have a specific questions about data collection. What was the purpose of data collection? For what purpose? What do the values represent? Operational definitions, and who, when, where, and why collected the data. So that's just the updated version of some of the rules that Dr. Shewhart suggested. So in relations to data collection and analysis and the measurement process and any kind of work we do, operational definitions, understanding operational definitions are paramount. And as Dr. Deming says, words have no meaning unless they are translated into action agreed upon by everyone. An operational definition puts communicable meaning to a concept. That means once you say cold, hot, late, smooth, exceptional, they all have the same meaning. Everybody has the same understanding. And of course, the classic example I really like is what Dr. Deming says. What is the operational definition of 50% wool and 50% cotton? I mean, it depends on you cut it one way, If this is a blanket, you cut it this way. Is this 50% wool, 50% cotton? You cut it this way. Is this 50%? And this is, what do you mean by that? So it depends on how you define it. I'm reminded when I would buy sweaters a few years back before my size got a bit more noticeable. I could buy a size of medium to extra large, depending on, and they all fit me the same. It depended on the manufacturer and designer. So there was no operational definition of medium, large, extra large, and so forth. One of the things that is relating to control charts and understanding variation is these operational definition of this term. Significant, random, control, homogeneous. What does that mean? And we'll see later that all of these in light of control charts have the same meaning and what it means. When you say something is significant, what does that mean? When this is a random process, what is it? What does control mean? When you say this process is in control, or you use the term homogeneous, what does that mean? So we'll see that all of these terms have the same meaning, and confusion can cause a lot of problems. Along those lines we'll see that the 3 sigma limits as the limits of variability is an operational definition. That's what Shewhart suggested. When we look at the balance between the overreaction to variation, mistake 1 and mistake 2, and Dr. Shewhart says the 3 sigma limit is the best balance. It's a balance between minimizing the errors between the two situations, mistake 1 and mistake 2. The other Shewhart rule is rule 2. We just shared one rule 2. The data should be presented in a way that will preserve the evidence. So in developing control charts, he says, criterion, we should make the most efficient use of order of the occurrences. That's the time order you collected. In 1939 book, he uses this data set to show exactly that. So uses this data set and produces this control charts with a number of what he called assignable or special causes. He said that if you remove the order, and he introduces a chart, since I didn't have the disordered set of data, I disordered this myself. I just ordered it randomly, supposedly randomly, and produced the chart. In other words, I removed the order by which the data was collected. And you see there is no special cause present in there. And he makes a very important point. It is the order that gave rise to assignable cause. It is the order that gave rise to assignable cause. I think that's a very important concept to really understand and comprehend. It is the order that produced the special cause. And that's why people say, well, we randomly select samples for the control charts. That's not the case. You collect in the order that is relevant to the process with a specific subgrouping, and it's the order that gives, in this case, it's the order that gave rise to assignable cause. I show you an experience from some of my work. This is the monthly discharges from a local hospital, and this is the original data. You see these 2 months for 24 months, these 2 points indicates a special cause. I reordered it. I just mixed it up and produced another chart. You see, the special cause disappeared. In this case, we have order. It says 2 months in a row. We had 2 or 2 out of 3, 2 months in a row, we have that assignable cause to appear. Once you mix it up, once you remove the order, or for a lack of better term, disorders your data set, you lose that feature of your data. So that's very important to try to to maintain the order by which the data was collected.
So quick question. Are those
Yes.
two data sets, they produce different standard deviation based on the order?
No, since this is an individual and moving range chart, and moving range chart, the limits, that's a good question. These limits are based on the moving range chart. So when you order the you remove the order, so it takes the difference between these two and these two and these two to produces that. Now in this case, it reduces these two and these two, but these are not the same values as previous. There may be different months. So that moving range is not exactly the same, but it does produces the same uh, uh, sort of message that we're trying to do. So
Did we just change the operational definition of control limit?
no.
We
It
just
was 3
re
sigma.
Let me just okay. So can I? There is a slide that shows the formulas a couple of slides away. Maybe I can
Okay,
wait until
sure.
then. Okay. All right. The other rule that Dr. Shewhart suggested says any summary of a distribution of numbers should not give any objective degree of belief in any one of the inferences or predictions to be made therefrom that would cause human action significantly different from that action would if the original distribution had been. In other words, do you make the same decision as in this as you would in this? This is a distribution. So the histograms really masks the special causes. So would you make the same decision using this distribution as you would this? So that's why the histograms mask, because it completely covers or ignores the order of data by which you collected the data. So the histograms mask the order and prediction. You don't have a ability to predict when this one versus this one, because that you've lost that. So here is another example. This is the time interval between accidents. Now, this is the histogram of the data set that I've shared with you before versus just simply a run chart. This is not even a control chart, a run chart. And you can see how the prediction, how some of these peaks and valleys in the data set has been masked if you just simply use that. This is a snapshot of the data. This is a running record or behavior of the data over time, and it offers you much more ability to observe how the data behaves over time than this one. So the distributions really mask. The important thing is the order of the data at times may be the most important feature of your data that you need to preserve. All right. So what is the data is trying to tell you? What is the process is trying to tell you? What is the variation trying to tell you, as Dr. Deming says, about your process and the people you work on? Then to do that, we have to consider variation over time, observe the behavior of data over time. So Shewhart helps us categorize that. And what Dr. Shewhart says, Irving Burr is another early people like Nelson and Eisenhardt and many others that Dr. Deming always referenced. He's the one who said the control chart is the process talking to you. Dr. Deming refers to that in page 333 of the Out of the Crisis. So we have an underlying process that produces a data set, and if you plot that data in a simple run chart, you see the behavior of the process over time. So what Shewhart helped us characterize in his work, he noticed, he identified two types of variation. He categorized one type of variation. He originally called it random, and Dr. Deming calls it common cause. He said he changed this title for not in concept, but for pedagogical reason. And, Wheeler and others have had other names for it, but they all signifies the same situation. Common cause variation produces points on a control chart that over the long period all fall within the control limits. Common cause variation is the same day to day, period to period, lot to lot, and shift to lot. It has a predictable variation. It has a known capability. So that's the important part. If the data collection and analysis is the basis of action, and all actions are about the future, it's not about the past, then what kind of action you took? In this case, when this state is present, you act on the system, underlying causes that produce that. So achieving a statistical control is the beginning of improvement. It's not an end in itself. It's the beginning. As Dr. Deming says, once you achieve statistical control, improvement commences. That's what he says. Improvement commences. The other thing is important to mention about the statistical control, the word control can be really loaded, especially in healthcare. All that means is a random process. This data set is a homogeneous set. A homogeneous set is the data set that is affected by the same system of causes and is predictable in the near future. That's all that means. It doesn't mean good, bad, or indifferent. You can be in control and be in big trouble. You can be in control and produce 100% defectives. Okay? But all that tells you this is what the status of your current process is. What action you have to take after that is different. But you achieve that first. You have to achieve a statistical control, meaning random variation, systemic causes, and then you move on to the next step and what needs to be done. The other type of variation that Shewhart identified, known as assignable cause. Dr. Deming called it a special cause. It can be called signal or exceptional variation. That usually is what Shewhart suggested, usually manifests itself with a point outside the limits. Now, there are other detectable detection rules, find other cause to find assignable causes, but that's what Shewhart suggested. It's detected it's something special, not part of the system of common causes. This is system of common causes. This is not a part of the system of common causes. Wheeler calls that the dominant variation. Is unpredictable variation with many common causes and some exceptional causes. Now, here is what course of action you take here. The course of action you take here is removing the special causes. It's not on the system. You remove the effect of the special causes. That's the distinction between the two cases. Work on the system, work on the special cause. That distinction is very important. Is the difference between success and failure. And that's what this is. I put them side by side. The first step in the examination of data is accordingly to question the state of a statistical control that produced the data. Okay, that's the first thing you have to do. You have a data. If the first thing you do, put it in a run chart, a time series. See what it does over time. It's easy to do. And then you move on to the next. Sometimes the special causes are so dominant you can visually detect that. So if we don't know the difference between these two states, we fall into the problem of tampering. A challenge that confuse this with this. That if you start acting on each one of these points, as we have done in our first session or second session about what happened here, what happened there, what happened there, what you're actually asking when you say what happened here, you're treating that as something special, something assignable. And then when you ask that question, people run around and try to find answers to. So in this case, you're treating one of these as one of these. That's mistake one. The other case is you have a special cause and you ignore that. You say, well, these things happen all the time. That's mistake two, confusing a special cause with common cause. But here is the point. How would you know the difference unless you have a methodology to distinguish between the two? And that's what Shewhart did. Shewhart did. The greatest contributions to understanding variation quality in the last century. He gave us a methodology to distinguish between these two. And what's powerful about it, he says the 3 sigma limits are the boundaries for that, to distinguish between common cause and the special cause of variation, between random variation and assignable variation. Without having a control chart, you have no idea at what type of variation you're dealing with, which all of that leads to the 2 mistakes I just described, is interpreting common cause as a special cause and failure to identify a signal or detect a signal. A missed signal is an opportunity wasted. This is one of the best definition. I'm not original with this. I tried to find the origin of this. It's one of the old papers I read. The only time a single value is informative is when it is a special cause. The only time that this value can tell you something, or this one or this one or this one, if it is a special cause. All other numbers are the same. The system prevails. The system prevails. When you say this is a special value, this is a significant value, this is an outlier, or whatever term you use to distinguish that from the rest of the data set, you're saying this is a special cause. Do you have an evidence to prove that? Do you have an evidence to show that? Otherwise, you may be tampering. Lack of understanding of this leads to tampering. The distinction between common cause and a special cause or leads to mistake 1 and mistake 2. And that's what the tampering is. I want to pause here for a second. Ask you, based on your experience, based on your work and professional experience, what type of mistake you usually observe? What do you think people or organizations, which mistake people usually commit? That is treating a common cause variation or random variation as a special or a special cause variation as common cause.
I suspect it's common cause as special cause because you're like looking at everyone in isolation because you're not doing comparisons.
You're
you don't
suggesting
have
mistake one. Mistake
Yeah.
one, yeah.
That's my feel.
Yeah.
I'll say too, yeah, and coming from the sales world, I think possibly talked about this in classes previously, right? Coming from the sales world, it's a very common thing to mistake a common cause as special cause. You have a good month and it's, look at what you did to create this good month in sales. You have a bad month and all of a sudden it's, we got to change our entire sales strategy because one down month, even though it's totally within, range.
Range of variation, yeah. Pizza 1 month, kick tush the next month, huh?
Exactly.
David, what do you have? You turn your camera on, so I'm assuming you want to share something.
I just want to concur. I think that's the most common, maybe by far the most common mistake would be mistake 1, where common cause variation is misinterpreted. Every point is interpreted as to mean something, and you get the big gear turning.
Yeah. So what do you think is the consequence of that? Talk about the big gear turning. What do you think is the consequences of that when you say what happened this month or what happened today or what happened? What do you think when you demand explanation of and asking people to explain common cause variation? What do you think it happens?
For me, it created a lot of anxiety, a lot of a lack of trust in the directors of the board meeting. They were chasing the wrong thing. And the guy I'm thinking of used to take it in turns to pick on one director and go every month, we'll choose a different director, you're not performing. And it was just bullying tactics.
Yeah.
I was going to say too, what we call, chasing shiny objects. Like they're constantly looking for some fix, uh, instead of being intentional about their strategy and sticking to a plan and iterating, executing on it. Oftentimes they'll look for some sort of, magic shiny object to come in and fix their strategy because they see that down month or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
that's a big thing.
I would say that the small gears don't have any better understanding that it's not a special cause than the big gear. So it leads to a lot of frustration because you can't correlate your action to the result. So you keep doing stuff and you can't figure out why you're not being productive. And to what Martin said, a lot of anxiety comes from that uncertain, like not understanding the cause and effect of your actions. So.
What
Also,
happened? Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
no, also I was going to add just it seems to be a common cause of executives to be micromanaging. They're just jumping on the bandwagon and looking at point by point and not looking at the overall picture. So they micromanage, they demand action, people go off and do something, then that creates tampering and the situation gets worse. But the chief execs thinks they're doing a brilliant job, but they're not. And it's really sad. And they're just showing their ignorance, in my view.
Yeah. Well, micromanaging is a good example of reacting to every single point. That means overreact, mistake one. But there also one terrible consequence of that. When you overreact to common cause variation, that leads to actions. It doesn't stay static. People start making changes. Deming says it's overreaction to variation. So you're reacting. By overreaction to variation, you introduce more variation. And over time, as he says, off you go to the Milky Way. So that's the consequences of that. When you tell somebody this month sales was bad, do something, they're going to do something. They're going to do something. All right. And whether that's good for the organization, for the customers, for the products and services, they're going to do something. When you demand your people to do something, their job depends on that, and they'll do something.
They have to move the funnel, right?
What's that?
You have to move the funnel, right?
It's the funnel experiment, right? It's the funnel experiment. David was in my class in 1995. He still has my funnel experiment results. Speaking of year 2000 slide, David had a small kid then. Now he has a 17-year-old daughter. I mean, a 17-year-old granddaughter. So we're dating ourselves. So, okay, so let's continue with that. So that's what this is. The result of which, oops, sorry. I had to activate my pen again. Says if you overreaction to variation and which results inevitably increase the variation and will increase the cause from here on out. That's what happens. So we have actually institutionalized tampering. And we've shared the examples in healthcare, overreaction to the last point. A colleague of mine and I did a paper a few years back. There is a concept, as many of you know, if you've taken accounting classes or run any kind of business, called variance analysis, where you have a target for material costs, for labor costs, or whatever. And if you deviate from that target, you do a variance analysis and you take action. And this is actually what we teach people to students to do. And I'll show you that's the case in really teaching managers or future managers how to tamper. So we wrote a paper called When is a cost variance considered exceptional, requiring action? We looked at about a dozen very popular textbooks in managerial accounting and looked at all the section on variance analysis and the examples they used and made a list of all the cases that they were actually tampering with the process. They were telling you to tamper. And here is one case in which when all variances that exceed the instruction, when all variances that exceed the lesser of $12,000 or 10% are defined as significance. So that was the instruction. In that case, variances during weeks 2, 4, and 5 were considered as variances requiring action. So we did it. The control chart of that shows that all those 3 points are within the control limits. Random variation. Control chart is in control. That is only routine variation present. No exceptional variation detected. Action on the system for the improvement. Yet we're telling people act on this. Not telling people, we teach them. These are all undergraduate and graduate accounting courses. We teach them act over this, or over this, based on this, on the instructions with some arbitrary target that you set up. And people go ahead and do that. I mean, they have very elaborate system in organizations. They have software, they have accounting software, they have people all working in the accounting department trying to determine the variances and then take action. You send instructions to operations or production or whatever, and they make the action. So we have a group of people that burn the toast and a group of people that scrape the toast trying to find the answer. So a system that is in control has a process capability. Has a known in process capability. And that process capability is 3 sigma on either side, or 6 sigma. That's 6 sigma limits. The control chart is the process of talking to you. And this is what they're talking to you. They tell you what your capabilities are under current situation. The process capabilities or the limits are calculated from your data. It doesn't come from someone's office. It doesn't come from someone's ideas, like 10% here, $20,000 there, or whatever. All of these values, the average, the upper and lower control limits, are estimated using the process data. Hence, what you see is what you're getting, or is the process talking to you. And so you can jump up, jump down, cajole, scream, yell, is what you see is what you're getting. Now, here is the control chart of the data that we started a couple of weeks ago, and we've used it throughout. Is the number of it's the incidence count, the monthly incident counts, or this is actually in a hospital. What does the chart tell you? Well, first of all, you see there are no special causes or assignable causes present. That means the system is in a statistical control, or routine variation is present. You can call that homogeneous. You can call it random process. And this is how you interpret that. Based on the last 20 months or so, you're averaging a monthly incident count of 12.5, but it can vary anywhere between 3.9 or 4 to 21 incidents per month. These numbers could be randomly spread out anywhere in this process. Under current condition, this can be predicted in the near future between 4 and 21. Not indefinitely, but in the near future. Any action that you take, it must be under the underlying system. So the idea of getting people here and saying why the incident rate increased this month, or why was it this high, or why was it this low here, you're tampering. You have a bigger problem on your hand. And that is your monthly average is at 12.5, and it can possibly go as high as 21. You have a bigger problem to worry about than simply this point and this point, and this point and this point. And any action that you take, it has to be on the system of causes that produce that. That's the interpretation. Right now, the control chart, the process talk to you. Where do you go from here? You take an improvement strategy. It's a systemic strategy. Any action is on the system, not only on the individual points. Yet in management meetings, in our discussion of this we had, what happened there, what happened here, and so on. Every time you ask those questions, you're tampering and increasing the variation in the system, making things worse, rather. Over adjustment, making things worse, and there you go from here on. It is a predictable process within the upper and lower control limits in the near future. The systemic action, the action you have to take is on the system, underlying system of causes that produce that. That's a bigger challenge than if you had a special cause here. Assignable causes are readily found. That's why Dr. Shewhart called it assignable. You can simply assign a cause to that. This is the challenging part. The systemic improvement is the challenging part. Okay. So this is the moving range, and I'll get to Mike's question. You see this point is the difference between this point. It's a moving range. This point is the difference between these two. It's a good idea to include the moving range so people know you're actually are familiar with it. But the moving range simply monitors point-to-point variability. If the difference between 2 points is huge, it may still be within these limits here, but it may go outside the limit there. So we'll have cases to discuss that. But when we're referring to moving ranges, is the difference between sequential points, 2 points. It's called a moving range. And here is the formula you use for that. This signifies 3 standard deviation. Average plus 3 standard deviation. And we'll have a session where we say the origin of these calculations. And this is 3 sigma below that. All right, Mike, going back to your comment. So this value is the average moving range that came between these 2 points and these 2 points and these 2 points and so on. If I change the sequence of these numbers, which I did in that example, I mix them up. This average moving range is not much different, but it's not going to be the same because I changed the order. It's still a moving range average, but it's not going to be the same as the original data because I changed the order. Since the moving ranges averages are used in calculating the limit, so you get a different control limits. Mathematically, they usually are very close to the original data, but mathematically you get something different. Because I changed the order, this point, the first point might have been the difference between these two. So I changed the order just to make a point. And that slightly changes the moving range average. So the wrong way to estimate dispersion is to put all your data in some software and say, give me the standard deviation. That's the wrong way to do it. And there is a reason that's the wrong way to do it, and I'll defer that to when we're talking about calculations. All right, why 3 sigma? Shewhart was very clear. It's not a statistical discussion, mathematical probability discussion. It says we know this is what is known as Chebyshev's theorem. It says the best place to place the multiplier is at 3 sigma based on experience. Experience dictates that the 3 sigma is the best, and is the operational definition. And just read this. This is direct quotes. That 3 sigma seems to be the acceptable economic value. That's the title of his book. It provides the best economic decision, and what Deming described it as minimizes the cost of the balances between mistake 1 and mistake 2. You can change those limits to any level you want to. Make it 2.5 sigma, make it 4 sigma, whatever. That's not the point. But there is a price to pay for each one of those changes. And what Shewhart says, based on experience, 3 sigma indicates the best balance as an economic value. The balance between making, not to look for errors when it's not there and look for the errors when they are there. So that balance is 3 sigma limits. So I'm going to offer a few cases here. What Dr. Deming says, that the upper control limit represents the prediction of extreme output under present process. To seek an output beyond the upper control limits is to defy gravity. I've never heard him or anybody to be that specific and that strong about making that comment. If you define, this is 24 months of sales. If you demand a value beyond the capability, so this is predictable in the future, you know, $90 million a month on average. You can vary between 70 to $110 million, $111 million. If you demand something beyond that that is like defying gravity. Because that's what the capability of the process is. Now, Joyner described that a bit, elaborated on that, and I really like that. It says there are actually 3 ways you can achieve a point beyond the capability of the process. One is to distort the data, you know, just fix the numbers, like Enrons of the world. Fix the numbers. The other one is distort the data. You know, 1 month sale is bad, and next month sales you demand it, and salesmen are going to sell things that the customers don't need, or they need future sales for next month, and that's distorting the data. And the third one is improve the system. Improve the system through a series of PDCA cycle, continuous improvement, where that point becomes a part of the system. A part of the system. Well, maybe at a higher level. That's the only way you can achieve that. If you want something beyond the capability of the system. Either distort the data, distort the system, and people are very good at that, creative accounting, or improve the system where it includes that point. And these are the 3 sigma limit zones, zone 1, zone 2. These are referred to as Western Electric zones. So I just put it there so in case you hear what they mean. This 1 sigma zone, 2 sigma, that's you divide the upper side and lower side into 3 equal parts, and each one of them is known as sigma zones. 1, 2, and 3 sigma zones. Now here is the improvement opportunities. Detection rules, you may have a point outside the limit or 2 out of 3 there. And the only reason I'm going through this somewhat fast because we get back to this later again, 4 out of 5, and 8 points in a row on one side of the equal sign. And sometimes they're hard to detect. If many of you use software, be sure you use the appropriate software, and we can actually activate the zone analysis, and it automatically puts the zone in there for you, or you can select which detection rule you like to be included, and they do that. These are called the Western Electric references. And here is another recognition of Nelson's work by Dr. Deming on his page 321. It says, a convenient summary of useful patterns based on the Western Electric book has been compiled by my friend Lloyd Nelson. And he mentions that in 321, page 321. That useful summary is called the Technical Aids. It was published by the Journal of Quality Technology, and this is the date. It's really a very useful reference. I had a copy of it, and I was trying to show it to you, but I couldn't find it where it is in this maze of office I have. Now let's go look at some of the examples of these special causes. The state agency in Wisconsin inspects nursing homes, and they dedicate number of hours per inspection. I grabbed some data from there, and the number. This is the number of inspections, and you see inspection number 10. It took over 227 hours, and that requires attention. They have to go look at it. All it tells you, it raises a flag that there is a problem. It doesn't tell you why. It just tells you it raises a flag, and you go there and investigate that. And as showed this later in later cases, is that this was this particular location had a lot of complaints against them, and it requires detailed inspection. That's why it was a special cause. I showed you last week or 2 weeks ago the near misses published by FAA, that's airport or misses. And this is the data for a couple of years that I obtained. You see all the detection rules are shown in there. This is monthly near misses recorded. Here is 2 out of 3. Here is 8 in a row. Here is 4 out of 5 and a special cause. Now, what I was trying to point out there when I introduced this the first, how the news gets, oh, what happened here? What happened there? What happened there? Near misses, 5:30 national news, is everybody jumps. You have a bigger problem here on your hand. Look at that. The average near misses are 44 near misses every month, and you can go as high as 62. You have a big problem on your hand. This is a case that really kind of is a classic case. I was involved in that with a group of allergists, asthma and allergy specialists. This made the literature, and I think it made it to one of Wheeler's books too, I think, Making Sense of Data. Dr. Boggs, who is an allergist in Louisiana, and we collaborated very closely for several years, he learned about Deming, he learned about control charts, and put all of his patients on recording their peak flow rate, which is a measure of lung capacity, and record it, and he would put it on a control chart and discuss it with them. This is the control chart for a 7-year-old young girl, except she's not 7 anymore, who had bad asthma, and Dr. Boggs was trying to convince the family to make some environmental changes to no avail, removing the carpet, and I think they had a dog or a pet or something. And this little girl, these are terrible numbers. These are terrible numbers. This little girl was in the hospital, missed classes all the time, and Dr. Boggs was trying to convince the parents to make some changes. So she goes off and comes back, I don't know, 20-some days later with all her numbers, measuring her peak flow rate. And Dr. Boggs put it in a control chart, and voila, look what showed up. You see the control chart here is moving on along. Then all of a sudden, there is a shift upward. Remember, a special cause is an indication of the process has moved to a different level, even temporarily. In this case, the process average has moved to that level. And then it returns back and continues at the lower level. We were baffled. Dr. Boggs was baffled and asked what happened there, and studied the notes, because the patient would take note of activities. It turned out Callie, that was her name, this was a weekend, and she moved away to spend a long weekend with her aunt and her family about 200 miles away. This was in Dallas, Texas. What happened? And then when she came home back here, what do you think happened there? An environmental changes, the system changes. The aunt didn't have carpet and they didn't have a dog. And all of a sudden, the capacity of her breathing shifted upward. All she did moved away from home. And look what happened. So this is before moving from home, 4 days away from home and back home. This was a great teaching tool for Dr. Boggs to the parents. That here is what he was talking about. Special cause indicated a shift in the environment, a change in the environment that improved the quality of life, and was able to convince the parents to make changes in the house, removing the carpets or do whatever they had to do with other factors. Now, here was a little girl that was in and out of the hospital, missing classes because of the asthma problems. She was healthy, she could breathe, and later on, look at her lung capacity. It moved the average of 180 to 453 with narrow variation. She could breathe. I think it's in the Making Sense of Data by Don Wheeler, and I think the title of the story is Susie Can Breathe or something. That case made it there and made it into the literature. Here is a good example of a special cause that was identified. It was a flag. It was identified, and you were able to make changes. How would you have known that if you didn't have a control chart? You wouldn't have. You wouldn't have been able to detect any of those things. Another use of control charts, in this case IMR, is making comparison. This is a section in the Wheeler's book I really like, is the making comparison in the Making Sense of Data, this book. So you're assuming that there are two groups and you're comparing two groups. In this case, is a group that was on a bonus plan, and this was another group that had no bonus plan, and there was a measure of comparison, and that was the measure of comparison was accidents per million man-hours. And they were trying to figure out if there was a difference and the two groups are the same or not. So this is the control charts of the group A with the plan and group B without the plan. They're both in control. You have the average upper and lower control limits for each one of them. When you're comparing two things, and you can apply that to two processes, two salespeople, two locations, two machines, and I have some examples of that, you're assuming that they are comparable. Two things are comparable if they came from the same system of causes. Otherwise, they're not the same. So what he suggests, and I've used it quite a bit very effectively, says, okay, if you're saying this group is the same as that group, then extend the control limits from this group, see if it contains the members of the second group. If you say they're the same, or you say they're homogeneous, you're saying they're affected by the same system of causes. But you can see they're not. 4 points are outside the limit when I extend these control limits. Or you can extend these control limits from this group to that side, see if they contain this group. No, they don't. There are 2 points outside the limit here. There are 4 points outside the limit here. So they're not the same. They're not the same. In fact, if you look at the averages, the group with the bonus produces on average 6 accidents per million hours than the group without bonuses. This is not a too homogeneous data set. Homogeneity means they came from the same system of causes. All you do is to make a comparison. If they are contained within the same limits, they don't have to have the same averages. But if they're maintained within the same limits, then they're from the same system of causes. That's what the random process, a homogeneous process, means. They are affected by the same. When you say a homogeneous data set, what you're saying is all the data points are affected by the same system of causes, or they came from the same system of causes. Here is another case in my work where I was helping with a group. The group was trying to determine, this was a state agency, was trying to determine if some of the employees' asthma was work-related or exacerbated at work, known as occupational asthma. All these workers already had asthma. That was established. But is it getting worse at work? This way you have to look into compensation or job change and things of that nature. So 50 subjects were selected. They were sent home on vacation for 2 weeks to establish the baseline, no work, and corrected their lung capacity, and they came back. So this is the baseline for this employee, and this is the control chart for that. We extended the control limits after they returned back to work, and this is their data peak, their lung capacity returning to work. You see, all the points are fluctuating randomly within upper and lower control limit here. So their asthma did not exacerbate at work. It came from the same system of causes. As opposed to this employee, this is the baseline data, and they returned to work. Look what happened. So you can assume or assume that this employee's asthma was exacerbated at work. Okay, there are 2 different systems. That's the only thing you can attribute this function is return to work. Here is the comparison of the 2 machines. This is one of my favorite cases. I have used it for many years for a variety of things, and you'll see 2 of it here. That this company management says these 2 machines are producing the same. These are, by the way, sandwich patties that you buy in the frozen section of your grocery store. This is the west machine. This is the east machine. So we took some samples. This is the control chart of the west machine. We extended the limits. Look at where the east machine falls. Not the same. These 2 machines are not the same. Similarly, if you extend the east machine, all of these are outside the limit. They're not the same. The claim that these 2 machines are the same is not correct. They're operating at different levels. Dr. Deming in Out of the Crisis introduces the concept of a mixture, and I'm going to read just one paragraph from that on page 354. Study of a mixture may obscure chance to improve. Let us think of 3 production lines feeding their output into one channel. I like to think of these streams feeding into a river, the mixture as in figure 39. So I didn't have room to type all of that. So this is what he's talking about. So what he's suggesting to do, so this is the stream, the mixture, and these are the sources feeding the mixture. You can think of this as a process. This is the output of the process, and this is the input of the process. In fact, whether the mixture gives a problem or not, it is a good advice to study the source. Bring them to the same level, that should say level. Reduce the variation of everyone, especially those that show wide variation. And he uses Bill Scherkenbach's quote, search upstream provides powerful leverage towards improvement of the mixture. Move upstream into the source. That's what he's talking about. So I have a couple examples for that. I just showed you the total hours of inspection with the state agency of the nursing home. So I grabbed, that's a portion of the data for 1 quarter, I believe it is. About 80 some inspections. And you see, this is the hours. But the agency has a number of different, 5 or 6 different regions that feeds to this data. And I divided, I split, I separated the sources of the data by regions. That feeds into that. That's the stream. Okay. Now, each one of these may have a different characteristics that needs to be addressed. David, when I was doing this, I was thinking about your locations and sales. Work your way upstream and address each one of these separately. You can do that the same with the number of employees. Let them keep their own control charts and whether it's monthly errors, monthly production, daily, whatever it is. Because everybody may need a different help to improve. Work your way upstream and improve the system. Each one, improve each element at its source. This is that machine I just described to you, that they claim that these two machines are the same. The target is producing, this pad is at 50 grams. And this is a data set from both machines. And did the same thing. There are a couple of things here that is worth noting. This is the east machine, this is the west machine. We already showed that they're not the same, and you can see that. This is an average of 54 grams, average of 51 grams. And when you plotted the data, you see this zigzag shape? That means the data was aggregated. You need to separate them and study them separately. All of these were the east machine producing high weight, and all of these were the west machine that producing close to the target. And I did a control chart of the two machines side by side, and you can see the average weight here is about 51. The average weight here is about 54. You may say that 3 grams or 0.3 of a gram is not a whole lot. But when you're producing millions of patties a day, or hundreds of thousand patties a day, that makes a big difference. But you can see the difference between the two machines. Each one of them needs, for improvement, needs a different attention, different approaches. This was a very interesting project, and I'll share more features of it with you later. All right, this is the improvement strategies, and I think I'm going to stop there so we can leave time for discussion. I feel like I was talking 100 miles an hour. All right, we have 15 minutes for discussion, so we're open for discussion. What do you think? And so, Mike, did that briefly answer your question about the moving ranges? You get, because I changed the order, the moving ranges change. So you get a different average. And then since you're using that average, moving average for determining the control limits, they're a little bit different. This is still the data set.
I get a little bit more understanding. I guess what I'm figuring out, though, is that I thought the control limits are 3 times the standard deviation is calculated by the normal statistical formulas. And I think you're telling me that's not the way you do it.
The control limits in this case are specifically calculated. They're calculated in a specific way. And I suggest most people say the Shewhart method. What you're referring to is you put that and get a global standard deviation, that formula I showed you, that not to do it. There is a reason for that, and I can elaborate for that more later on. When you're taking the global standard deviation, that big Excel number function that you put in there, that global standard deviation or the standard deviation was based on some theoretical and probabilistic concept. One, that it was a normal distribution. Two, that the samples were selected randomly. And none of those cases apply to control charts. Control charts, the samples are not selected randomly. So on the global, you assume your data set is homogeneous already. That's why you can apply. If you have the assurance that they are homogeneous already, you can apply that formula. But you don't know that from the production data. You don't select your samples randomly. You select your samples based on rationally.
They're selected in time series, and so
in time
if you
series,
use it because if you use the standard deviation, the global standard deviation there, you essentially remove the time element, and that moving range allows you to sort of retain the time relation between the data.
How to do that? And early statisticians in quality painstakingly went through different methodologies to show that using sample size parameters like ranges is the best way, because you're dealing with the small sample sizes and you don't know if your process is random. But once you plot your data and your process is in control, then you can call it random. That's what people call random process based on Shewhart's method. You don't know your process is random. In the global standard deviation, you begin with the assumption that your process is random. There is a distinction between the two. And as Ben said, then you lose the time series and things of that nature. And when you use the global standard deviation, because you're assuming random, it takes the difference between each single point and your average, not your subgroup and the average. It gives you a much wider control limits. That's why the global standard deviation, you rarely have any special causes because they're so wide. Because you begin with the assumption of homogeneity, that it is homogeneous. And we'll dedicate a session or have a session about the calculations, where these calculations come from.
In your example that you showed where you had the data in time order and then you just randomly rearranged the data into another order which was not related to the time order they were originally collected, then you applied the formula, the moving range, to calculate standard deviation, and that's why you got different control limits. So the emphasis there, the important message is you must always adhere to the original time order to calculate your moving range to estimate the standard deviation. If you ignore the time order by whatever method, you will get an answer, but it won't be the correct answer. It will be an aberration of what the original data is trying to tell you.
Yeah.
And another point you said about moving upstream, I had a personal experience of that working in the Scottish whiskey industry, and they were always focused.
Were you a taster?
I did.
Did you do inspection and taste the?
No. In order to do that, to become a professional taster and a master of malt, you need a minimum 2 years experience. You must have a very sensitive tongue and nose and palate, and that's not me. I just bite it and took it home. Anyway, but they were making a grain neutral spirit, which to all intents and purposes is vodka. And then if you redistill vodka with botanicals, you get gin. And they looked at the weekly yield results from the distillation process, and there were lots of variation. And the weekly meetings focused on the output. So I just asked them to walk me through the process. Let me ask some dumb questions. I like asking. I don't know how to make whiskey. I just ask questions. And turned out that the incoming grain was coming from 12 different suppliers,
Right.
and was written in a book, but nobody plotted the data in a run chart. So we did that per supplier, and there had to be a maximum. I won't give away too much detail, but there had to be a threshold for which the grain to be accepted. Turned out that two of the suppliers had holes in the roofs so that the rainwater could come in and affect the grain. So we got rid of that, showed stability, and then we ran the designed experiment. Because if you think of a verb noun in FMEA, or as Americans call it FMECA, it's make GNS, the verb noun. So let's do a DOE. So we had stability coming in. We wanted to focus on making the grain neutral spirit, and then the output was the liters of absolute alcohol. And it turned out there was an interaction. But the key message here is two messages which resonated. One is go upstream and look at the process. Second is, especially with the big Six Sigma community, don't jump into DOE, because if you've got an unstable system, no design of experiments is going to help you out. You need stability. And then you can work on continual improvements. And I know you've used the word continuous improvement. I preferred to use the word continual after what Bill Scherkenbach told me a couple of months ago in London, that if it's continuous, it's like a line that goes up and up. But if it's continual, it trickles along, then you can make a big step change, and then you can move forward. So that's my contribution for tonight.
Speaking of whiskey and statistical work, it reminded me of, some of you may be familiar with T distribution, student T distribution.
Yeah, William Gossett.
Student was William Seeley Gossett in early 1900s. He works for Guinness Beer.
That's right.
And he did a lot of statistical work, but he wasn't allowed to publish it under his name, because then the competitors would know where he works. So he published those under student.
Correct.
Pen name is student. That's where all that came from. And of course, his work is remarkable.
And just on follow on from that, I've come to my mind, the T distribution is an approximation to the normal distribution for small samples. But people talk about you need a sample of size 30. Where does that come from?
Yeah.
And in my mind, it comes from when you get a sample of size 30, the T value for the tail end of the distribution is very, very close to the normal distribution value. I think that's where it comes from. But anyway, I'm digressing. So over to you guys. I'm going to mute myself.
Anybody else? Perry, Jim? Perry, what did you do with your data on your blood pressure?
I'm taking it to the doctor on Tuesday to go through my stress test and my echocardiogram and a couple other data points he's been asking me to measure, see what happens.
Okay.
It's all diagnosis time for me.
All right.
So your request, Fazel, I put together a run chart, but not very well.
You want to share it?
And so it's probably not correct, right? But I'll share it,
no,
and
then
maybe I can learn something. Well, I know it's not correct from one standpoint, but so let's see.
Go ahead, share it with everybody and explain what. On the bottom, there is a.
No, no,
outside-
I gotta find my file.
Oh,
I've got too many PowerPoints open. Hang on just a minute. Let me go back and find that. I have two screens and I never know where the yeah, okay, so there's that. So let's try this again. Now I lost my Zoom. Ah, there we go.
well, we haven't lost you.
It's yeah. I guess that's good. That's not what I
There you
want.
go.
Oh yeah, yeah, okay. So this is I'm not sure I can see what you're seeing. Oh, if I shared it, it might be better. If I zoom in. Is that
Yeah, we see it.
okay? So this is basically weight, and there's a couple of places where I forgot to record it, and these control limits are calculated based on the global sigma, the global
Yeah.
standard deviation times 3. And so my first question was, how comes nothing's out of limit, right? And so you answered that already. So I will go back as my homework and try to figure out how to calculate it according to the Shewhart method and see what happens. There is kind of an interesting little thing here, which I thought was going to be a special cause, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
And we had the end-to-end thinking conference and we had some really great food and my weight went from this to that in 2 days. And so I thought that might be interesting, but I guess it wasn't because it's not really enough points in a row. But so that's as far as I've got.
Or it will be interesting when you recalculate those limits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if this is not proprietary information, I'm happy to work with you on how to develop the control chart and look at it together, maybe for next time.
It might be HIPAA, but it's not proprietary.
Right, and it might also be interesting if you calculated just the range variant, right? You might have had a big spike that would have showed up as a out of control limit on just the range check.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
that's right. Because I suspect that has to do with the California weather. Because on a really hot day, I might drink a lot of water, or I might lose a lot of water, and so I don't think that you can gain that much or lose that much pounds of flesh or fat in a day, right? So it has to be water, I think.
Were you using a different scale than usual?
Nope. Scale's always the same. So I presume
you brought your own scale with you while traveling.
Well, I wasn't traveling. I was at home.
Oh, that's right. You're local.
Yeah.
Sure.
When I see weight jump like that, I always jump to probably increased carbohydrate consumption, right? Because then your water, you get more water in your muscles, and then all of a sudden you're
yeah. So there's lots of things that I try to keep track of the carbohydrates, but that's really, really inaccurate because you're guessing a lot of times. How big was that portion really?
Yeah.
So
well,
that's
Mike,
really inaccurate.
I have met you in person. You're the last person in the world that needs to lose weight.
Maybe this is why.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well,
Anyway,
like I said, if you
will.
like to have a kind of session, so I can go not only over the data, but on a little bit more detail on the control limits, the calculations, and the distinctions between the two, and I think, but we'll have a session on that in these.
I'm glad to share this data as just for educational purposes. I mean,
well, for a while, if that is any encouragement to you, I'm diabetic, but I just had an A1C test yesterday. It's 6.2, and I got a message from my PCP. Great job. So she's the one I've worked with for 20 years now, and I take my charts and everything. And she always says, "I love your charts." So for a long period of time, I had my weight, my blood pressure, my glucose test every Monday morning. I would do that. I had a pressure, and I would plot it. And then at that time, I was keeping with my steps too. I had a watch that kept with all of that. And it's very helpful for two reasons. Number one, when you're engaged in it, I use the example of Dr. Boggs and his patients for peak flow rates, for lung capacity. They were involved, they were committed to their care. It was really very helpful. They would come in there with their little charts. It was on paper. They all had written numbers down, and we helped them put the chart together. That's number one. And when you're involved, you can see it, and it's makes a difference. And second is when opportunities come for educational purposes, like Perry is going to see the doctor, it's a good way to discuss it and educate others. Okay. All right. Any other comments before we part?
So I'm still kind of stuck on the linear trend. And so I'll go back to James's case with sales. Suppose you wanted a linear trend. Suppose you wanted your sales to go up. I can't remember the distinction between continuous and continual, but maybe you wanted it to go up continuously, like say 2% a month. So you could, have like 25% sales increase over the year, something like that, right? Can you design that in, and can you produce a chart that removes that trend so you can do the statistical analysis and then puts it back?
James, he was talking to you.
Oh, sorry. No,
You're the only James on this.
Yeah, no, I haven't played around with that kind of stuff before. Obviously, people want a improvement in their sales, right? That's a big part of what they're trying to do. And for me, it's more of like what kind of systematic changes can we make to move up that average and move up your data over time. So I haven't gotten that fancy. It's more of just saying like based on your historical data, here's the kind of variation you can expect. And then now we go back to the strategy side of things. What can we do in your sales strategy to decrease the variation as well as increase the average?
So this is interesting to me because I'm working with a company and I'm not their sales coach. I do leadership and other stuff for them. But they want to increase their sales, but more importantly, their profitability.
Mm-hmm.
And so they come in with these ridiculous goals that clearly have to be, way outside of the control limits. And okay, so as an outsider, I get to ask, okay, so how are you going to do that? Well, it's up to the people. Yeah, I don't know if it's totally up to the people, right? So you kind of have to have a plan here, a methodology. They're beginning to get that you can't change results without changing the system.
Yeah.
But they still want to, their profitability is running like 3.5%. I won't tell you the actual numbers now because it gets too involved. But and in their industry, their typical profitability is 8 to 10%.
Okay.
And so they would like to grow towards 10%. And so there's a clear case of, do we do this in step functions or do we do this continually? And what's the science say about that? So that's
just a second, Ben. Joe, did you?
Yeah.
I see you posted something on the chat. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. It sounded like if you want to ramp up, just align the center line to the ramp, and then every month you see if you're still within control. I don't know, just that's my mental model when I was thinking about if you wanted to draw a new center line, just align. You're right. That's a great point. How do we stay in control when we're intentionally changing the system?
Yeah, that's the right question. And do you do it as I think I don't know who it was. Anyway, somebody was suggesting that continual versus continuous. I think it was Martin that was saying that. And so do you do it in step functions and then get that process under control, then another step function, get that process under control? Or do you do it, could you take it as a linear trend and control it around that linear trend?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's not really how it works, though, right? It's bigger systematic changes that really get you the result. And like when I'm working with clients, then I go back, let's say when I increase revenue, right? Then I'll go back and do an A20 analysis on their lead sources and say, where are you actually getting leads? And where can you invest more resources towards what's actually giving you leads? Or do an A20 analysis on their trying to identify top accounts and say, are you going after the right industries? Are you going after the right contacts there? And changing their prospecting plan to match that. Or the cost side of things.
System changes.
Yeah, exactly. System changes, right? Because if you want different results, you can't just say, my sales team's going to work a little harder each month and get better results. That's
Well,
not.
you can in a way, right? You can say, hey, I got a sales team of 10. I'm going to add 5, and so I
Sure,
should
yeah.
be able to increase some product. But I did change the system, right?
Yeah.
Well,
What was
just before you really do a lot of those things, you need to see what the state of your process is. Is it in control or is it a special call? If it's in control, it requires a system changes. It doesn't matter, where you need to determine the state, establish the state of the process before you take any action. That would be paramount.
Yeah.
So
I'm
this is
going
all
to
good.
ask for that data. Yeah. I'm going to ask for that data, and
Okay.
I might
Well,
have to. I might have to fuzz it a little bit for proprietary reasons, but I'll share it.
Well, if you like to share it and get everybody's
I'll
help,
try.
my help, will be happy to help out. All right.
Thank you.
So we'll meet in 2 weeks, and meanwhile, I will select some papers from different areas by different. These are a lot of original papers, and I put it in a Google Drive with appropriate label. Once I get get it done, at least initially, some papers, I'll send you an email and invite you. You can open on the Google Drive. I don't know. I guess if you don't, I don't know if you can you open a Google Drive if you don't have a Google account, email.
Yeah, I
But
think you
I'll
can
try
share
it
it. I think you can share a drive in a public way.
Yeah.
But then anyone can access it. You wouldn't be able to restrict it to just us.
Okay. I'll see what I need to do, and I'll select some papers along the lines of your area and along the lines of some of the original papers in these topics, and you're welcome to use them.
Awesome.
All right. Well, you have a safe weekend, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Meanwhile, feel free to contact me offline, and if you'd like to chat more and discuss different topics, I'll be happy to do it.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
You folks have a good day.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.